Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. This interview is about talent and why it is such a crucial piece of the regen ag revolution. Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, investing as if the planet mattered. Podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. In March last year, we launched our Patreon community to make it easy for fans to support our work. And so many of you have joined as a member. We've launched different types of benefits, exclusive content, Q&A webinars with former guests, Ask Me Anything sessions, plus so much more to come in the future. For more information on the different tiers, benefits and how to become a member, check patreon.com/regenerative agriculture or find the link below. Thank you. Welcome to another episode, today with Lachy Ritchie, Farmland Portfolio Manager of Wide Open Agriculture, co-founder of Agtalent. Agtalent is a search engine for training, jobs and experts in the sustainable and regenerative agriculture industry. Welcome, Lachy.
Thanks, Koen. Pleasure.
So to start with the usual personal question, how did you end up founding an ag talent platform, but how do you end up in farming, in ag, in regenerative agriculture and soil?
Sure, mate. So look, I grew up farming, so broadacre farming in a variety of different contexts. But like many young people growing up on the land, we sold up our farm when I was about 12 years old. Kept working in ag right up until my early 20s, but I guess at least in the region where I grew up, if you're a young person working in farming and you don't stand the chance to inherit a farm, you're not really actively encouraged to pursue ag as a career. You're very much encouraged to head off to the city, which is exactly what I did. So I basically left the farm, early 20s, went to the city, went to university, and I found myself into the social enterprise pathway. So ended up over the period of 10 years co-founding 3 different social enterprises, completely unrelated to ag. And through...
Everything is related to ag. I'm joking.
No, totally, man. Good point. It is in one way or another. And look, especially when you start to look at social enterprise and you start to think about making a positive impact on the world. And it's like the further you go up the chain, it always comes back to environment, climate change. And then, the food we eat is one of the biggest impact areas in that. So look, I guess, after 10 years in the city and on this social enterprise pathway through a bit of serendipity and life's interesting journey. So my partner and I had the chance to manage a small farm, and it turns out the small farm was owned by 2 of Australia's leading impact investors. And our goal on that farm was to help to set up a small-scale intensive market garden with a couple of really talented growers. And I guess over that 2-year period that we spent on that time, I physically dove into the world of agriculture and regenerative agriculture, in particular coming from my social enterprise background, and realizing that from an impact perspective, I now believe and understand quite clearly that I don't think there is anywhere else, dollar for dollar, that you can have a greater impact on the world than the food system, particularly when it comes to climate change. So it really was 2 years spent physically diving into the soil and tangibly understanding it again, and just, I guess, being reawakened to agriculture and the potential for agriculture. It wasn't the ag I grew up with, which was large, broad scale, very conventional agriculture. It was, it was a real awakening for me. And just understanding that I don't think there's anywhere you can have greater impact than in agriculture.
And I want to unpack that a bit. You mentioned, and I think the first sentence or second sentence, as many born on the land but not in a position to inherit. We were definitely not encouraged to stay on the land and encouraged to go to the city. I see that in many places, but how does that non-encouragement or encouragement to go to the city and non-encouragement to stay in farming, How does that happen? What should I, as somebody that was born in the city, should imagine basically the push to please don't stay in farming and please move to the city?
Yeah, it's really subtle from sometimes not so subtle when you're sitting in a careers council meeting at high school and they're just basically saying, why on earth would you want to be a farmer? There's no money in that. There's no future in that if you don't own
That's not subtle
land, which is not subtle at all. And look, to be honest, if you're quite good at school, the encouragement is, it's the classic. It's go off to university, become a lawyer, do medicine, become an engineer, do something that's like, guaranteed high paid job kind of thing. So there's a lot of that kind of permeated through us, at least, coming from my own personal experience in the school system to, encourage that people go off to university and get, the highest formal training they can, and that farming is, potentially a backup. And it's not, it's just not painted as a big, sexy, high profile career in the same way that a lot of other industries are painted, at least again, coming from my own personal experience.
And that awakening moment, which happened over those 2 years in Regen Ag, or in this case in the market garden, that must have switched completely your idea of the sexy job you maybe wanted to do the rest of your life.
Yeah, it was huge. I think just obviously, my having spent 10 years in the world of social impact and impact investment and understanding how that whole sector is working and evolving, and just suddenly realizing that, this thing that I grew up with and took for granted is, it can be hugely impactful. It was, it was a really big turning point for me.
And what made you decide to take over and manage that farm? Because you're working in social enterprises, probably could have done that for a long time. Was there a moment where was one of the social enterprises involved in food? Oh no, you mentioned actually not. How did you cut back to food and ag, but very different ag than where you grew up? Because at some point you had to leave the city and take over this farm.
Yeah, sure. So it was a bit of, so the love of my life, my now wife, Jess, she basically had the opportunity to move over to the other side of the country for a new job opportunity that was outside of the cities, and, wanting to support her in that and interested in a change. I went along for the ride, basically. And then we found ourselves on the other side of the country, which was, back in the state where I grew up. And, just through a series of serendipitous events, it actually kind of happened because we went to a farm gate to buy some vegetables, and I bumped in and I saw the guy who owned the farm, who's Danny Almagor and Barry Liberman, who are their family office is Small Giants. And I'd actually met Danny previously at a conference, and I'd literally walking into his farm to buy some vegetables, and we bumped into each other, and we knew had that moment of recognition of like, how do we know?
What are the chances? Yeah.
Yeah. And then honestly, so from then he took us on a tour of the farm, and then a few weeks later basically called and said, what are you doing? When are you moving over? And he initially tried to recruit my wife.
Then he can be quite persuasive. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, he tried to recruit my wife because she's trained in horticulture, and I kind of just weaseled my way in there and said, well, and the opportunity eventuated for me to be involved as well. So we both basically took on the role as caretaker of the farm, and then progressively were joined by some really talented people, and it was turned into an amazing little community of people there working to make the farm what it is today, which is pretty impressive now.
And it could have stopped there, in a sense that you could have managed market gardens, or you in plural actually, the rest of your life, but it didn't. You moved on to a very different project. I mean, still in the Regen Ag space, but a very different scale, wide open ag, and co-founding Agtalent. Can you share a bit how that came about?
Yeah, sure. And I think, in that journey as well, for that few years, I really recognized that my skill and I guess my passion is more around the startup phase of businesses and enterprises. And that's really where I've kind of honed my passion. And on the farm, we're working with a couple of very skilled and talented growers. So Mikey and Kez from Mossy Willow Farm, just to give a little bit of plug there. They are amazing growers, and there's really that recognition that my space is helping with the start, and there's no real need for me to carry on beyond that point. Also, within that journey of being on that farm, we hosted interns and we started running internship programs. And there was these incredibly talented, skilled young people coming from the city who were absolutely relishing in the chance to get involved in ag. And they were working hard. So they kind of blew a few of these stereotypes apart, where you would expect people coming from the city to not be able to work hard and don't really know what working is. And they just completely...
Every time I visit a farm and I stay with friends, etc., I always realize how hard it physically actually is. I don't think most people in the city have an idea, except for the ones that really dive in, like the ones you're mentioning, the interns that really spend 2-3 years, and they know what they're talking about. Most of us, I'm claiming us as a city folks, have no idea how physically it can be.
Yeah, and this was, this is a very small scale intensive market garden growing on 1 acre. So everything is manual, and they would work incredibly hard through the hot summer. And they were just basically coming out of the end of this internship program and going like, where to now? You know, what are their options? If they were loved the work, loved the agriculture, loved the potential impact of regenerative ag, and really understood that mainly from a climate change impact. But there was just nowhere for them to go. Like, there was no structured pathway, no like, oh, next you do this and then you do this and then you do that and then you get this training and then these job opportunities open up. So it's just realizing how fragmented and non-existent that career path is, particularly in the niche of regenerative ag. So that was like the intern and young person side of the story, which obviously really resonated with my personal experience growing up. Just around it, not being a credible or structured career path, particularly, like I said, in this alternative side of agriculture. And then the other side of it was working with the Small Giants family office and realizing that obviously from an impact investor perspective, regenerative ag is climbing on the agenda of impact investment offices, I now realize, worldwide, and is a really hot topic.
Luckily, I mean, they're starting to listen more and more to the podcast. But yeah, it's been a journey. But I see a lot of investors coming mainly from the climate change angle now, coming to the space and to soil and realizing it's one of those great potentials.
Yeah, absolutely. Realizing it's it could be huge. And Danny and Barry from Small Giants were, the whole time we were down on the farm, there was just constant discussions and philosophy around how do we grow this movement? How do we see more investment flow in the right direction? And I was realizing through those investor conversations and with other groups as well, that one of the big barriers to deals getting over the line often actually comes down to talent. So it was coming up as a repeat problem within the investment space of succession planning and finding appropriate farm managers. So there was I'm seeing these like two sides of the problem of, the group trying to hire people and then the young people trying to get jobs, and there just being this big void of disconnect and fragmentation in between. And it was from that the idea for Agtalent was born.
And can you describe a bit what is Agtalent? I mean, it is a search engine, etc., but I'm sure there are a few more lines and a few more structure of what Agtalent is at the moment and what it wants to be or will be in the near future.
Sure. So basically it is a search engine for jobs, training, and experts. And so how that works from the training side of things, if you can imagine an Airbnb style marketplace where you can go to one website and all the best training from all over the world to do with sustainable regenerative ag is all on the one place. You can buy tickets, you can compare, you can see ratings and reviews. And then the extension of that is that if you participate in training, you can create yourself a profile, a little bit like an online CV. And then, as we develop features in the platform, we'll be able to suggest further training for you. Potentially you could rack up points and earn credits for doing training. And then that obviously will give us as a platform a big database of people who are participating in training in the regen ag space. And then we'll be able to match those people to jobs. So then obviously the jobs side of the platform is pretty straightforward at this point. It's a jobs board. So we've got jobs coming up all over the world, again, all focusing on sustainable regen ag. And then the third part of the platform, which is which is quite interesting, is this expert marketplace. So it's basically a place where experts, either as individual independent consultants or organizations, consultancies, training orgs, all have little business profiles and can showcase their team, their talent, their skills, and also link through their training programs as well. The dream as well is to have online coaching available with some of these consultants worldwide. And I guess just have a really tight delivery of training.
I mean, it seems like you're almost founding 3 different businesses, but actually they're all very tightly connected. How has it been going? Because I think you've been active for not extremely long. How's been the response? What are surprises? How's it been with the launch of this talent platform?
Sure. So look, we've been working on this for about 12 months now. We received some startup funding about 3-4 months ago. And so we're really in the kind of final stages of developing what we'll call the platform stage 1. And then we really go into now just a validation stage. And, can we get enough traffic and traction on the platform to make it viable? Like, early signs are incredibly encouraging. Like, we're, like I said, we still haven't released the completed version. And I think we're 3,500 views in the last 28 days on the website. So look, it's climbing. Like, that's very encouraging for us. Probably the biggest surprise is how readily training organizations and consultancies want to get on board. So we're actually finding that, some leading training and consulting organizations are keen to get on board. And not only that, they want to promote and advocate for our platform. So there's been this real kind of almost, finally, someone's looking at this issue coming from the experts within the industry.
Yeah, because it's extremely fragmented until now. And everybody can call themselves an expert. And I'm imagining what the best ones see is the potential for the reviews and potential for actually creating a name by something independent and not just themselves and not just word of mouth is something that, at least if you're in the business and ready to scale and ready to really grow out of, okay, I do X trainings a year and I have 10, 20 people and that's okay. But if you're looking to really have an impact, you're going to need platforms like this to reach people that would never hear about you otherwise.
Yeah, and that's the feedback we're getting. Is I was initially worried that people might be scared of the competition. But what we're seeing is that really skilled advisors and agronomists are recognizing that and trainers, that if you're trying to change behavior on a farm, one interaction or a few interactions with a farmer is not enough. So if a farmer can afford to attend a 3 or 4 day serious training program or have an agronomy consultation, is what happens next? How do you keep these people engaged? And really what they're wanting and needing is long-term ongoing support. So there's a lot of interest for people within our platform to say, well, if we did an initial consultation, what about the idea of online coaching groups? And there's kind of other ways to keep people engaged on a long-term basis. And then the extension of that is obviously helping consultants and advisors to extend their network, reach international audiences easily, all this kind of thing. And, obviously drive quality with ratings and reviews.
And that would be something that you'll actually be hosting, these groups. Like, I have done a consultation with, 5 farms here in Europe, 5 farmers here in Europe. But I don't want to, or I don't have the resources to set up my own digital infrastructure to then do regular webinars with them or check-ins, etc. That would be potentially something I can do through Agtalent.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what we're building, is that level of functionality. I think our real value will be trying to get a lot of the physical real world content and get it online and get it out to broader audiences. So that, that notion of coaching groups, webinars, online training is, big on our agenda.
Yeah, sounds extremely exciting. And how's been the response, let's say, from the demand side? I mean, the farmers looking for experts, looking for training, looking for people to fill their job opportunities. What has been the response there? Yeah,
really, really encouraging. So we've just in the last week or two, we've made our first kind of successful job postings and placements where people have had enough high quality applicants that they're really satisfied with the service and are paying. which is incredibly encouraging from the job side, considering, the jobs board really only went live properly a month or two ago, which is exciting. And yeah, like we're building an email list daily. We just launched some training and job bulletins. So we currently have a fortnightly email that goes out to US audiences and also Australian audiences. There's basically a calendar of events of all the upcoming courses and training opportunities in each state. And we're finding that one like bulletin service is just getting a lot of traction. Like people are signing up all over the place. So it's, super encouraging. It's just, I think the thing with regenerative ag is it's globally, even now, despite all the, the excitement around the movement, it's a very small niche. And I just am cognizant that for us as a business, this is going to be a slow, steady burn. But yeah, it's incredibly exciting so far.
That's what you told your investors as well.
Yeah.
Slow and steady burn. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm kind of using the analogy that it's a bit like investing in farmland, things in ag just take time and they're not going to explode overnight. They're just going to be slow, steady, take it one step at a time.
And they're fine with that because it's actually something that comes back in the podcast quite regularly. Like we have to change the timeline in the heads of investors, or it changes automatically because the moment people invest in ag and food, everything takes longer than they are used to in software. But it's something that holds back a lot of people because they somehow have this notion of quick liquidity, quick exits, etc., which is just absolutely not the case if you want to rebuild any soil or invest in, let's say, food companies on a regenerative path. Are your investors comfortable with these timelines?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really fortunate at this early stage that the angel investors who are supporting us are completely aligned to the movement and really just see that the potential of this platform is getting in early on the beginnings of what will hopefully be the norm for agriculture in 10 years' time. And it's just kind of, getting in very, very early on a new wave, which we're very fortunate for. I think particularly as soon as you layer in a technology startup, people just automatically start thinking unicorn mode and, how quickly are we going to get 10x returns? And I just think acknowledging that technology within agriculture is a very unique and interesting space. So yes, patient capital is key.
And what do you see? I mean, I want to spend some time on one of your investors in a minute, Wide Open Agriculture, actually one of the groups you work with and for. But I wanted to briefly spend some time on the 10 years you mentioned. So what if regen ag is the norm in ag in 10 years? What needs to happen over the years? What do you see, in this case specifically, maybe in the talent space? What is because you say we get in very early. I think we all notice we are early in this space. But in 5 years from now, would you have seen massive changes already? Because if in 10 years it's the norm, we need to get going.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's huge. And I think, the interesting thing for me and the thing I hope is within the talent space, well, I guess a few things, but obviously I'd like to see a lot more training, and I think as well, if there can be levers out there to bring the quality along for the ride as well. So not like, a lot more, but high quality training, clearer pathways. But I think the main cultural thing that would be amazing to see change is just like recognizing agriculture as an incredibly challenging, interesting, exciting career opportunity. Like it needs to attract the best and brightest minds on the planet. And just how we make that cultural shift. I think that's going to be huge. And I think it has to happen. And I think, the more we start talking and understanding the links between agriculture and climate change and regenerative agriculture and nutrient density in food, and I guess all the flow-on impacts from regen ag, I just think it's becoming more and more attractive as a career to younger generations that are really driven by having a positive impact on the world. So it's, all of that stuff is, it's all unfolding and all very interesting. And, there's a lot to go.
And what would you, without giving investment advice, obviously, but as you have spent time in the investment world, let's say the impact investment world and also in ag, And imagine there are quite a few investors listening to this podcast and they're ready. They've read the books, they have visited the farms, but they haven't made investments yet. Where would you advise them to look out for, or where would you advise them to look to start looking in terms of this quite vast but still very small regenerative ag space?
Well, I think I wouldn't be telling astute investors anything new, but I'd say investing in teams rather than individuals is huge. I think agriculture is really interesting as an industry when you consider a farmer and they have to be, a labourer, an entrepreneur, a technician, a mechanic. They're like, 10 jobs all rolled up into one person. And
an inventor
and a marketer and all of these things. And that is, incredibly hard for someone to be very good at all of those things, to have the mindset, the skill set to achieve that. So I think from an investment perspective is if you're making investments and looking for the teams behind those investments. And I think if you are investing through either an asset manager or an existing agriculture fund, would be, who are their teams? Do they have people on the ground in the regions that they're working? And are they investing in succession planning? I mean, the average age of farmers in Australia is 60 years old. So if you're wanting to make a 10 to 20 year investment into regenerative agriculture, then you need to make sure that succession planning is in place and, that your asset manager or fund have active career programs and they're doing something in this space to nurture and grow the next generation of talent. It's going to be absolutely vital.
Yeah, I think you make an excellent point on teams. We, as an investee, would never, most people even say I would not back a startup company with just one founder. Like find a co-founder first or find a team first before I would even look at it as an investor. Somehow as an investor in ag, that until now was never an issue. And obviously it's extremely risky because they can never be all, like you mentioned before, at the same time and can be amazing at all of them.
Yeah, exactly. And look, really good asset management companies are really cognizant of that. And they have specialists who help with all the different aspects, and consultants and advisors where needed. So yeah, it's crucial.
And this is a question that I didn't steal, but I borrowed from John Kempf. What do you believe to be true about regen ag? He says about ag in general, modern ag, but I would like to ask it about regen ag. So what do you believe to be true about regen agriculture that others don't believe to be true?
Yeah, this is a super tough one.
That's why I'm asking.
Look, and, I'm a fan of John's podcast, so I hear this question a lot, and the answers are always really interesting. But look, I'm going to go out with a kind of potentially controversial one here and say, look, I do think regenerative ag is an incredibly exciting career opportunity for young people, but I think we can keep young people in regenerative ag without farmland ownership. Now, I know within Australia...
We can't?
I think we can. I think moving beyond the notion of individual family scale ownership of farmland is not necessarily a bad thing. In Australia, it's really culturally ingrained. And I'm not saying family ownership of farmland is a bad thing either. What I'm just saying, contextually in Australia, like Western Australia, for example, the average size of a profitable farm is $6 million worth of capital that you're sitting on, let alone livestock, machinery, working capital. That's just the land alone. So carrying that level of capital as a young person, if you don't stand the chance to inherit a farm, is near on impossible. In no other industry on earth would your kind of starting point require that degree of capital. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done, particularly in regen ag, around interesting and new ways of getting young people hooked in as land stewards as opposed to owners. There could be interesting things that can be done within investment funds, for example, where the farm managers and farmers are incentivized with shareholdings in the fund. So they still kind of have skin in the game and still firmly attached to land, but perhaps don't individually own the title as a family.
Yeah, I don't think it's controversial at all. For sure it's different. But it comes back to the discussion we had before on we would never consider in, let's say, startup investing or small company investing. I mean, there are obviously ways to incentivize your crew and your staff and your team to be part of it, and options, etc., are very, very normal. And somehow in ag, we do everything different. And I think the 6 million or even more is just a barrier that's impossible to enter, because the moment you do that and you raise that kind of capital, you're forced into a short-term cash version of ag, which is definitely not regenerative. And I think there are so many different ways of steward ownership and other ways to figure out to give young people that want to do that. And let's be very happy about that we have a group of young people that actually want to get into farming and want to get into farming completely differently, that we have to figure out ways to give them access and skin in the game and tie them longer to the land, but maybe growing into it, or the ownership is formally somewhere else. But I think it's a huge investment opportunity, because there's only so much land you can buy as an investor and then lease out. And I think we need all these different hybrid models to give access to millions and millions of young farmers, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the particular opportunity with regen ag as opposed to normal agriculture is that I think people are going to be attracted to this space as young farmers purely for the impact potential alone and for the sense of contributing to positive change in the world. So I think that carrot alone is enough to get people in, that ownership of land is not a requirement.
No, I think a return on their time. I think we do need to have a discussion on sustainability, financial sustainability of farms, and the fact that I really have issues finding profitable farms, like commercially, chemically, industrial driven farms that are profitable without any subsidies or without, EU, I think it's nearly impossible. I will probably get emails of this, but to find, and the regen ag farmers I meet, they're very different, but they also have very different margins. And actually, in some cases, are much more profitable if you look at their timing and if you look at what they sell. So it's also, I speak to investors that we see a way of making money in and investing in ag because of regen ag just approaches it completely different. So I think there's going to be also a very interesting carrot there. Not that you're going to be a multi-billionaire overnight, you're going to have your exits, but there's good money to be made, like honest, good money in regen ag.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, if we get into, the eventual reality of farmers being rewarded for ecosystem services. And I think,
Absolutely.
Tying in those positive impacts where, young farmers who are managing or supporting farmers as assistant managers or whatever are all tied into that long-term ecological gain on the land. I think if we can get some of those levers right and really incentivize people for being stewards of land and increasing the health of land, I think that's an incredibly exciting space moving forward.
And it's one that supposedly gets better. It's like it's not an asset. I mean, it's not in terms of these ecosystem payment services. We'll figure part of them out over the next years. Hopefully the nutrient density comes online as well, in a sense that we can have an honest discussion about food as medicine. And that should mean that the farmers that are really good at that will be rewarded, hopefully. I mean, we have to build systems for that, for producing more nutrients. So even if you can already, let's say, outcompete or compete at the current scale where food is still just food and not medicine, and where there are hardly any payments for ecosystem services, imagine in 10 years from now. I mean, you will be the one, sitting on an asset or working with an asset that has actually became better because you hopefully have rebuilt the soil, and maybe even getting a number of other rewards that others don't. So I think it's, in terms of long-term perspective, whoever gets in now, the same with the Agtalent platform, whoever gets in now and has the breath to keep going probably gets some very interesting rewards in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, I guess we've seen decades of agriculture effectively mining nutrient value from soil and depleting the natural value of the land, and to have that turned around and then farmers potentially monetarily rewarded for what makes sense anyway. If we can get to that place, I've got no doubt about the future of ag and, potentially life on the planet if we can get to that point.
And it's a bit of a switch, but can you spend a few words? Well, at some point I will interview definitely Wide Open Agriculture and maybe you, and spend a full episode on what you are doing in Australia. But can you spend a few words on it. So as we mentioned at the beginning and also a few minutes ago, what is Wide Open Agriculture?
Sure. So look, Wide Open Agriculture is a regenerative food and farming company based in Western Australia. And really, we're working across the side of the business that I'm involved with is Wide Open Land, which is a farmland asset manager. So obviously tying in a lot of the work I'm focused on around talent development and managing teams is we basically seek out and pull together investment opportunities in West Australian ag, and then we manage them ongoing on behalf of investors. And then, so Wide Open Agriculture has a food brand called Dirty Clean Food, which is just launching.
Very nice name.
Yeah, it's a bit provocative, and it's designed just to make people kind of delve deeper and understand where their foods come from, and the soil story is absolutely central to the brand. And look, so yeah, basically we're bringing product online now. We're currently selling regenerative grass-fed beef and lamb through food service to some of the best restaurants in Perth and looking to expand into export. And we have retail opportunities happening now as well. So branded product on retail shelves in supermarkets. So really as a company, it's working right across the value chain from my side of the business, which is farmland, right through to, being able to generate a premium for regenerative product.
And they are one of the seed funders in Agtalent.
Yeah, that's correct. So basically they made a seed investment in Agtalent alongside with me joining the company and starting to work there. It's basically Agtalent now sits within my portfolio of responsibility. So it's it's pretty amazing. I get to work on new farmland deals regularly. And then also, along the way, look at this whole talent development platform. And I guess as a company, they really saw that talent was a key kind of barrier and limitation to growing the farmland portfolio. So if we don't, any asset manager out there who looks after farmland, if they don't have a strategy for talent and talent procurement, then, they're going to be in trouble long term. So I think that, they really recognize the value there. And to bring it all under one roof is, pretty amazing.
Yeah, extremely exciting. I want to be conscious of your time, and maybe we can spend a lot of time on talent, a lot of time on wide open ag, and a lot of time on nutrient density and ecosystem payments. But that will be for another time. So I want to be conscious of your time. And wrapping up, I want to thank you so much, Lachy, for this evening actually for you. And we'll be checking in soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3, if this podcast has been of value to you, and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerative agriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much, and see you at the next podcast. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. How to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course? After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording these podcasts since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? And what questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? How to approach this space? For whom is this course? You, the soil builders and investors in this space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, agtech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. And the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No, this is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. We're gonna look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soy builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.